from the Retirement Institute of Namibia for me to be able to speak today. I've been asked to speak about the impact of COVID-19 on retirement plans, assets and liabilities. So I'm going to be sharing some thoughts that I've got. I'm a consulting actuary, as was said, I work for Old Mutual. I have clients in South Africa, in Namibia, in a few other countries, Malawi, Swatini, Lesotho, from that perspective. This slide is looking at the wrong at the moment, but what it says there is interesting to start with a quote from Lenin when, like myself, you're capitalists. There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. So that was very much something that we experienced back in March 2020. If we look back at March 2020, everything changed. When I compare the 1st of March, I remember traveling to Vincent on the 2nd of March, and I was there for meetings on the 2nd and 3rd of March. But by the end of March, it was a complete different world. People can also remember that. Landing in Vincent, and I had been to Malawi in January, and then I had started getting asked medical questions, which was new for me. But going to Vincent, was more and more and more that's being asked. And so it was a case of me trying to understand, looking back at that, how much changed, how much of that was short term, how much of that was long term. Are we ever going to go back to the way the world was in February 2020? I remember us celebrating New Year 2020, and everybody was saying 2020 is going to be my year, and wow, 2020 was a massive, massive shake-up. And we're coming to the end of 2021, and a lot of us, myself included, was all trying to process what exactly happened to this world in 2020. So we finally woke up to what we were facing, because it hit Asia already in December 2019, but a lot of us were in denial for the first couple of months. March, we actually acknowledged what was happening, and we then had to start taking action. And action was in the form of these major lockdowns that were being implemented right across the globe. And these lockdowns led to a massive, massive impact on business, which in turn caused this investment market crash. And it was across all the various kinds of sectors. So we saw equities falling, we saw the bond market crashing, we saw property prices coming down. And the business activities were generally good, very much good, because you couldn't function. There were controls, there were laws in place that stopped a lot of businesses from operating. And I remember especially those in the informal sector that suffered tremendously during that time period. So it became increasingly difficult to be able to trade, to be able to function and run a service company, run business during that time period. And especially in this part of the world, South Africa, and Namibia, tourism is a large employer of people, and especially on the small side, small business just lacked. I remember seeing my cousin late last year when he came to visit in Cape Town, and he was so relieved because he works for a tourism company in Johannesburg, and he was relieved because he only had to take a 10% salary cut. So other people had lost their jobs, and he was happy because he only took a 10% salary cut. He could still support his family. But we've seen companies closing down, we've seen companies being forced to retrench employees, so unemployment has definitely soared. So, yeah. And even the way companies were able to survive and keep their staff, they've had to put in some drastic action like cutting salaries or forcing people to take months and months of unpaid leave, even though that's not what they wanted. There's been a massive impact, especially like I said, on the informal sector and small business. Last year, I remember what we were going through the hard lockdown, March, April, May, when literally people couldn't move around easily. Then people were dependent on being able to move around to be able to trade, to be able to provide services like gardeners and the like. This wasn't happening. So obviously, there was a massive impact on the healthcare systems in the different countries. We've spoken, we've heard about the different waves. We've gone through 3 different waves already. We're now sitting here waiting with bated breath to see what sort of fourth wave we're going to be experiencing. We've experienced this large soaring number of deaths. I remember last year we went through the first wave, it didn't seem that bad. And then the second wave, it does in South Africa like a train, and it was really rough. Where at our church, for example, where we were involved, I was for the first time experiencing where we were having double funerals, burying husband and wife, father and daughter on consecutive Saturdays, which I hadn't seen before. And what was also then very sad for me was looking at Namibia from afar, was the third wave seemed to be particularly harsh on Namibia, much harsher than the first 2 waves. So we've seen loss of breadwinners, we've seen the loss of breadwinners and jobs general unemployment increasing, that's just created wide social security and retirement reform in this part of the world, so that's why I think to talk about this topic. So, two international organizations that we've got, the ILO and the World Bank, have got now what seem to be similar pension models. So we look at the different kinds of retirement and benefits that are provided, and we see what sort of changes are now coming through across the globe and within this part of the world. If we consider the different types of pensions, both in South Africa and Namibia, we've got state all-day pensions with state grant that are paid. We've got occupational retirement funds, which are put to tier 3. We've got individual retirement savings. We've got limited so-called tier 2 pillar by national social security contributory funds, which I'm also going to touch on. Right, so what are the common themes that we've seen from pensions regulators across the globe? Generally, in most of the world, unlike in South Africa and Namibia at present, there is no compulsory contribution requirement, there is no compulsory reservation requirement. So what countries have been doing is being more flexible when it comes to both enforcing these compulsory contributions and also allowing more flexibility when it comes to accessing retirement savings. The two examples that have been cited repeatedly are Malaysia, Australia. Malaysia with its national contributory fund, which has now allowed 3 different things for people to justify why they must get access to retirement savings fully, as opposed to being forced to reserve them for retirement age. Australia, where they've paid out similar to what's happening in this part of the world, they've got non-contributory pensions, which have been paid out as special additional benefits to those in need. Also, they've got compulsory contributions going towards what they call superannuation funds, which have now allowed 2, possibly there's a third one going to be coming through, individuals to draw money early prior to their retirement age because they demonstrated the need for it. Because otherwise, in both those countries, there was this compulsory preservation requirement that generally couldn't access retirement savings, definitely not in Malaysia, only under limited circumstances in Australia before your retirement age. Australia also, what's interesting there is that they don't have what we know as guaranteed life on the annuity market. They only have what we would call living annuities. And there they've become more flexible now in terms of allowing different drawdown ranges to be accessed by the pensioners in retirement age, as opposed to just forcing people to draw down more money during time periods when the market got down, they don't necessarily have to do that. But what we've seen is governments across the globe paying out these non-contributory pensions or grants in order to support people. And certainly in South Africa and Namibia, this has been playing a very big role over the last year and a half, almost 2 years, where both countries have been using social grants, special social grants in order to uplift people. Namibia actually was doing this before us, a few weeks, a month or 2, and Namibia was introducing special social grant payments last year before we introduced ours in South Africa. But also, what I was saying is that we don't yet have national pension funds in South Africa and Namibia. Before COVID began, there were already calls and movements towards introducing these. And obviously, this has just increased this demand to say, well, you should have these national contributory pension funds in both countries. What we've seen is that the Unemployment Insurance Fund and the Social Security Commission in Namibia have been paying out special amounts to be able to support businesses and employees because of the fact that there's been so much strain and suffering in the countries over the last year and a half or so. In terms of occupational retirement funds, what we saw across the board in this part of the world was that we were familiar with the concept of within defined benefit funds, employers wanting to go on contribution holidays. But last year we suddenly saw this need across various industries for employers and employees to say, listen, we're trying to survive, we're just trying to keep people employed as employers, we're trying to put them on the table as employees, we need to temporarily reduce or just cease paying contributions to retirement funds. And I've saw this in various countries that I was involved with as a retirement or am involved with as a retirement evaluator, that regulators were allowing this to be done in order to keep us able to survive. And also we've seen the increases coming through now, obviously from the higher mortality, so the funeral and life insurance premiums are increasing. And we've seen retirement funds being unfortunately forced last year to disinvest right when it's the worst possible time. So March last year we saw this massive drop in the investment market. And that was when people started losing their jobs. And the big recovery came in April, but in the first few months was still struggle, and it was during that time period that the retirement funds would be forced to to actually talk about assets in order to pay for that the main opposition to a party here, they introduced a new bill to Parliament to be considered to say we think that pension legislation should be changed and that loans against the pension fund should be allowed for more reasons than just than housing purposes. So the same in South Africa and Namibia, you can only take a loan for housing purposes. You know, you put South African law in order to make significant sort of changes that will increase the value of the property. So the opposition party said that doesn't look at the situation now, people should be able to take a loan against their retirement savings, other reasons up to 75%. And it was then that our government started saying, no, hang on, at this negotiating forum, we've got this idea of a so-called two-part pension system, whereby we would allow one pot, which is maybe roughly a third, the details are still to be described, because it's becoming increasingly clear that this is what's going to happen in South Africa, that we would allow this change and say that if I, as an employee of a large company, I'm put into a retirement fund, so I have an employee, I'm contributing roughly 1/3 can be put into a flexible access pot, which I can access before my retirement savings. Argument being that I'm eventually going to take out the 30 cash when I retire in any case. And the other 2/3 would then be going instead into a compulsory preservation fund. So on the one hand, I've got this 1/3 amount which I can access before retirement, and the rules will still be actually decided. We were looking forward to our Minister of Finance getting more clarity last week, but he just said it's still going to happen. He hasn't given us clarity. We expect to happen. It will be happening by the 1st of March. So in industry, on the side of South Africa, we're very much looking forward to seeing what is actually decided on how these rules will be working. But this is the idea that we would have this instant compulsory preservation introduced. And I find this very amazing because trade unions, especially in South Africa, have years, decades of opposition to compulsory preservation. But because this idea of allowing early access is so popular, everybody is now pushing forward to introduce it. So listen, I'm very happy to get my 1/3 out, and I don't care about the other 2/3. It's not clear if that's going to be exactly what's done, 1/3, 2/3. But I'm very surprised that someone will be involved in this retirement fund industry in South Africa for more than 20 years, that how quickly things have changed. So like I say, decades of change have happened in the last year, especially on this topic. And also, what we're hoping is that we will be able to see increased coverage of pension savings. People know that they will be able to have more access to their retirement savings if they have to do so. So a retirement community fund, for example, I contribute towards a retirement community fund, I can only access it if I turn 55 or if I die. Whereas the idea in South Africa is that we're seeing the different types of retirement funds and retirement savings becoming closer and closer. We've already seen now that provident funds are going to start being phased out from this year onwards. Now, in Namibia, what I'm finding very interesting is that if we look at the various countries in this immediate area, South Africa and Namibia, Sweden, Lesotho, like I say, have never had this compulsory preservation requirement. There are other countries in Africa, I cited a few examples there, that do have different rules and regulations when it comes to compulsory preservation. The Rwanda, a year or two ago, in fact, increased to say that you in an occupational retirement fund, you have to keep everything there until you retire. Ghana is similar. They were ever since they introduced the new pension legislation in 2008. Malawi, you have to preserve 100% of your employer contributions 10 years, 50% of employer contributions, for example. Nigeria had 100% compulsory preservation. Last year they started stopping this because of COVID. But now with the new Film Act, what it's implying, and it seems to be very quiet in Namibia, because in South Africa there's a lot of debate. But like I say, I'm just watching Namibia sitting here in Cape Town, but we don't seem to be having the same debate in Namibia as we have in South Africa. And what the new Film Act is implying is that you're going to be seeing compulsory preservation similar to what exists in Botswana and in Mauritius, which is 75%. So if someone resigns and has $10,000 in their retirement savings, they can only take $2,500 as a full benefit, and the other $7,500 will be reserved for retirement. So I am surprised that I'm not hearing any sort of loud debate about this coming from Namibia this year. Especially because there doesn't seem to be any coupling that with easy earlier access rules, whereas in South Africa we now see this possibility of having 2/3 compulsory preservation introduced because the 1/3 is going to be accessible. But then a bigger question for me that I always ask the more I travel around Africa and listen to people speak on the side. So in South Africa, as an actuarial society, we're trying to work there and speaking to government about how do these different benefit schemes actually integrate there. Are we covering everyone who should be covered? Should be covered. So in South Africa and in Namibia, we've got relatively large informal sectors compared to the developed world. What we see elsewhere in Africa is that the informal sectors are even bigger. The informal sector gets 70, 80, 90% of the working population in South Africa. And coverage when it comes to pension savings is very low in the informal sector. And the members understand and trust their pension. So for many people I see members of retirement funds that begrudge purpose. My employer says I have to belong to the retirement fund, so I belong to the retirement fund, and I think I'm going to be okay if I belong to the retirement fund. But how long are you going to be contributing to the retirement fund before you retire? I'm not really sure. Now, what sort of return are you earning on your retirement savings? What sort of projected benefits are you expecting at retirement? I don't know. I'm in a retirement fund and therefore I say, yeah, okay, because my trustees are supposed to be looking after me. My employer put me to the retirement fund, so I think I'll be okay. And the message I keep trying to preach is that members must actually take responsibility for themselves in order to assess are they in a suitable position or not. And are we assessing risk properly? So I think that 2020, 2021 has really shaken us up to say that the previous risk matrices that we used to draw up, that we used to talk about, we used to say, right, if I consider this risk, that risk, we draw up a list of 20, 30, 50, 100 risks depending on the size of the fund and the nature of the fund. And then we ask ourselves, okay, have we done the job? Yes, let's tick the box, let's move on to the next topic. Because we have to move on the agenda, we want to finish early. But are we actually asking ourselves whether we covered everything? Because I remember in 1996, when I was starting at university, one of the actuarial professors made this mistake. The probability rates can, by definition, do a curve, which I don't think we appreciated enough until 2020, 2021 hit us. And now we're asking, but have we considered absolutely everything that can occur? Because at some point it's going to occur. And these ideas of ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues, are we actually just paying lip service to them? Are we taking them seriously? Are we changing the world in a positive manner? So one of the things that I keep hearing, pushback that I keep hearing as someone who comes from the private sector that speaks about the retirement fund is that we've got this great retirement fund and there's a factory worker there now who's going from his 40s into his 50s and he's looked after, and that's great, but are we actually looking after him from a greater perspective, from a big picture perspective? You know, are his children actually going to find employment or not? Are his grandchildren going to have to deal with the environmental issues that are being caused by the way that the pension fund is investing or not? So are we trying to make a difference in terms of how society operates, how business is being run, or are we just going along in a passive manner and just accepting what we see? So that's another great point. I like the great power comes great responsibility. Are we as retirement funds actually taking this seriously? Are we trying to be agents of change? Or are we just on the receiving end in terms of we'll just accept whatever investment managers are giving us? Alright, so that's why I asked, are our priorities correct? Are we prepared to burn the planet if we can just chase more money? Are we ignoring the fact that we've got massive unemployment in this part of the world, which has just got worse during COVID? Are we actually ignoring the fact that there is huge issues that we've got with corruption? And in the private sector, we like to point fingers at the public sector, so it doesn't look at the corruption that happens in the public sector, but it's not like the private sector, we're completely innocent. There are issues that we also face, and you can look back to the last few years in terms of the scandals that have occurred, like Steinhoff and the like. It's not like we are completely innocent. Things are happening. Alright, so what is the actual impact then in terms of assets and liabilities? So what I said previous already is that last year there was massive investment loss in March last year. Absolutely massive. It's generally recovered and performance has been quite positive subsequently, but it's still volatile. And we get these idea of waves. We don't know where we're going to end up. We don't know what's going to be the position in a month's time. So we're expecting that the fourth wave is going to hit us by the middle of December. What's going to be the impact? It's again going to be Christmas time. We have a lot of business to do on Christmas in order to make ends meet, in order to make a profit for the year. And so we're very nervous about what's going to be happening next month, because once again we have into massive lockdown situations where again business is struggling and again employment is going to be taking massive amount. So we're starting to see increasing risk at the moment. So something I heard about first when I was still working in England about 8 years ago was this idea of organ donor rates in Western Europe and how it depicts the power of defaults. So anyone who's seen your presentation has probably seen me share the slide, so apologies for that, but I just find this amazing. That if you look at the rates of organ donor registration across Western Europe, they vary drastically, as you can see. And specifically, if you compare two countries, Germany and Austria, Germany and Austria are right next to each other. They speak basically the same language. They have basically the same culture. If I say that to a German or an Austrian, they will dispute it very, very strongly and tell me, I don't know, but you don't understand, in terms of our culture, we are different, the way we speak is different, blah, blah, blah. But as an outsider, they're very, very similar. But in Germany, often the German government, for years and years, spent a lot of money and effort trying to encourage people to register organ donors. I'm a big believer that when I'm dead one day, if calls someone to look at me. Sorry, I lost everybody there for a minute, so hopefully you can hear me now.
Yep. Yes.
I'm going to get back to my slides. Okay. Can you hear me at the moment?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. I lost you there for a minute. It might have been my side.
No, that's
so what I was saying, thank you. So I was comparing organ donor registration rates in Germany versus Austria. So in Germany, like in South Africa, if you want to be a registered organ donor, you have to get a form, you have to go stand in the queue, and you have to fill out the form, and you have to give it the form. Then they accept it, and they tell you you are now a registered organ donor. In Austria, when you are born, you are a registered organ donor. So in order to not be a registered organ donor, you have to go stand in the queue and fill out the form and give it the form, and then they'll say, okay, we'll take you off the donor list. So this depicts the power of default. But in Germany, despite the fact that the majority of people think being a registered organ donor is a good thing, I should do that, very, very few people actually get around doing it. In Austria, because people are registered at birth, they generally just stay registered as organ donor. And we see the same thing in retirement funds, that the default option is the option that the vast majority of people go with. So even as an old mutual employee, I belong to a staff retirement fund, and we've introduced a wide range of options when it comes to investments. There's 16 different investment portfolios that you choose from. More than 90% of people at this large financial services company, what they do, they just go along with the default. And at retirement funds, our clients are seeing exactly the same thing. That there's always a small vocal minority of people, but the vast majority just go along with the default. So it's so important for trustees to develop these defaults in a suitable manner. And a couple of years ago in South Africa, we had these new default regulations that came in for this very reason. Because our government was realizing that actually it's the design of the default often makes the biggest difference to someone's eventual retirement outcome. All right, so other possible solutions, what can we do when we look at the situation? For me, COVID hasn't changed anything fundamentally. It's just made it more extreme, the situation that we've already seen. So, based on what we just said, should we limit our number of choices? So we've seen individuals that they come out of the investment market when the market has already crashed. They lock in their losses, and then when the market rushes, they're sitting in a cash portfolio. So do we actually start limiting choices? I put the question mark there for a reason, because people want the choices, people will exercise the choices, especially it might be more about communication and education as opposed to limiting choices. Could we be moving to more stable investment strategies and then sacrifice the potential upside rate in order to have a more stable and moderate type investment return over the long term? Now, this idea of smoothing, and you're going to say, well, yes, even you work for a big insurance company that has a massive book when it comes to smoothing business, but I think back when I was in my 20s and I was a newly qualified actuary and I was becoming a evaluator, and this idea of smoothing investment returns used to be like a swear word to me. It was horrible. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to smooth investment returns? should not be necessary. You should educate your members and you should give them the options, and there's other investment products that can do a better job about protection compared to a smooth bonus idea. But now that I'm a 44-year-old, actually, and I've been working in this industry for more than 20 years, I see more and more the way humans behave. Like I said, this idea of defaults, that people just go along with their own ideas, occasionally, but most of the time they just go along with the default. And smoothing, when you put everybody into defined contribution funds over the last few decades, and expose the underlying members to those underlying risks of market volatility, right people that get into retirement age, the life stage philosophy, going into a conservative portfolio, that's one route. Another is smoothing. I'm becoming more and more open to this idea of smoothing of investment returns. No, I'm not trying to sell a mutual product. Doesn't have to be done kind of all mutual. It's just be that concept. And actually participating in international actuarial conferences was also very interesting because people seem to be coming up with this idea. I've seen British actuaries and Japanese actuaries talking about, hey, this smoothing idea, maybe it's not such a bad idea after all. Cash flow management is this idea of you really want to be drawing down from our investments during time periods when the markets are down. Can't we rather balance off our contributions coming in versus our benefit payments going out so that we protect our funds from a liquidity perspective, not trying to force drawdowns when assets are already low. You get allow flexibility, deferring retirement savings. In the past, which would still be the case in Libya, it's actually the employer's prerogative whether you want to allow someone to work past retirement, you want to change the fund rules and trustees to allow someone to be paid up past retirement age. The tax laws allow it, tax laws in South Africa have changed. The problem we've got with in the past is that we've seen increased longevity where people are living longer and longer. I think this was before COVID, and wanted to work longer in order to save more for retirement. At the same time, massive abuse unemployment. So, how much flexibility can we introduce so that people at least have that idea of, well, I can at least wait another 6 months or a year before I have to join my retirement saving. So, I always think this message about educating. Education and communication is probably the most important thing, just to really empower individuals with retirement so that they understand what they face, they make the right decisions. We obviously see financial advisors out there who act like wolves, who not give people the right advice, so do we make sure that people have this right decision? I'm attacking financial advisors now unfairly. Are these actually giving the right advice also to retirement funds, or we're just going along with what the world? Things will work in big numbers, we work on averages. So are we giving them advice that's going to work for the majority of people, for the average member, or are we also taking individual members into account whose circumstances might be quite different? So, for example, when it comes to a living annuity versus guaranteed life annuity, so the experience in South Africa and Namibia has been over the last 20 years that there's been a massive change where 90% of people who buy annuities now buy living annuities. And we give this advice that people should be going into a guaranteed life annuity because a guaranteed life annuity is a better way of managing risk through an insurance company, which is a whole product. For myself, what did I choose at the time? I choose an annuity. I would have choose a living annuity. For my personal circumstances, I have 2 children that are autistic, and therefore they're going to be disabled and dependent on me for the rest of their lives, not like dead. So I would prefer that because leaving a legacy is very important to me. And at the same time, I'm giving advice to other people to say, leaving a legacy shouldn't be what's important. Children should look after themselves, and you should be looking after yourself until the day you die. But at the same time, individual circumstances like my individual circumstances are different. So we still need to allow people to have flexibility and understanding so that they can make the right choices. So that's coming down to the end in terms of these are the thoughts that I'm having at the moment. Are we really fit for purpose during this time period? Even before COVID, like I said, we had these challenges of massive employment and market conditions that weren't great. Were we doing enough with people understanding what they need to understand in terms of their retirement funds? But now in this new COVID world, we're not even in a post-COVID world, despite the fact that COVID's been around for almost 2 years now. We're not in a post-COVID world yet. We don't know when we're going to be in a post-COVID world. We don't know how different the post-COVID world is going to be to this COVID world. But what are we doing as retirement funds, the advisors of retirement funds, the trustees of retirement funds, in order to make things fit for purpose, looking after members from a holistic perspective? Trying to see the big thing, making a difference in people's lives. And those are my thoughts. Thank you very much.